time for a segment we call Talk to Me, and for that we head to college football, where all eyes are on Arch Manning this year as he takes over the reins at Texas. Expectations very high, but his famous uncle believes his nephew may have an advantage. So, Peyton Manning, talk to me.
I'm such a believer in mastering the system that you're in. And when you have new coordinators every single year in the NFL or college, that's just frustrating to me. I was lucky, Tom Moore, Pat was there my entire 14-year career. Belichick gave Brady some different coordinators, Charlie Weiss, McDaniels, O'Brien, but it was the same system, right? Nick Saban makes his quarterbacks, our new coordinators, learn his system. So does Kirby. And so the fact that Sarkisian calls the plays, and Arch has been there 2 years already, is going to know the system. That's going to be a huge advantage for him.
So we want to bring in our college football crew to talk about this. EJ, his last name requires us to ask a question like this. Is Arch Manning the next great college quarterback?
Well, look, he absolutely is, and I'll show you a few clips here from one of his starts last year against Mississippi State. But I think, Peyton is so right. The continuity of having the same play caller throughout your tenure, whether it's in college or in NFL, is everything. But the biggest thing, guys, that I noticed as I'm watching the tape is the calm footwork. When you watch young quarterbacks that are freshmen, sophomore, guys, they're chattering their feet all the time because they're waiting for receivers to come open. They're not as sure. Right here, a 3rd and 9 situation. Look how calm his footwork is. He's got a 3. He's going to hitch up into the pocket. He's going to bounce once. He's going to allow his receiver to come open. Now, look, this is a drop, but still, look at the accuracy. A lot of that led by the calm footwork. And another situation, 3rd and 9, right before the end of the first half. What does Mississippi State's defense try to do? Fire them up. They're going to bring an all-out blitz. And you can tell all the corners and safeties right along the line trying to cover these receivers. Arch does not panic at all. 3 and a hitch. He buys time. He hangs this ball up and gives his receiver an opportunity to award him with a touchdown right here. So when you ask about the expectation for Arch Manning, I think it's just to win. Of course, he's going to continue to have growing lessons, and there's going to be things that are up and down in this first year as a full-time starter. But from the tape that I've seen and the small sample size, Arch is ready to have a huge season, and largely because he's been in the system going on 3 years now.
Paul Finebaum, what are your expectations for Arch?
The absolute roof. I think there's a reasonably good chance that Arch Manning will be sitting on the front row in New York at the Heisman ceremony. That's assuming that his team does what it's supposed to do and compete for not only the SEC, but for the national championship. And I really believe they will. I think Steve Sarkisian, who's one of the most amazing play callers I've ever seen, made a critical mistake late in the year. He was way too loyal to Quinn Ewers, who was banged up and was really ineffective. Had Arch Manning been instituted in the second half of that game, like Nick Saban did a couple of years ago with Tagovailoa, I think there's a reasonably good chance that Texas would have beaten Ohio State and won the national championship. They're very capable of doing it again this year. I believe also that Arch Manning is the best college football quarterback we have seen since Tim Tebow entered the scene in 2006.
That is some high praise, if you remember Tebow's career. Heather, do you agree with these assessments from EJ and Paul about the sky being the limit here on Arch Manning?
Let's take a deep breath, my friends, before we give Mr. Manning the Heisman Trophy, okay? Because that was Mississippi State's defense coming after those calm feet, not Ohio State's defense, which he'll see in the season opener. Look, Arch Manning needs time to grow and learn and make mistakes. He's got 4 new starters on the offensive line. He lost his top 3 pass catchers from a year ago. This is going to be a different look in terms of new faces for that Texas offense. The other thing is he's not even the best quarterback on the board right now going into this season. Let's talk about Penn State's Drew Aller, South Carolina, Lenora Sellers, Garrett Nussmeier. When you look at LSU, so in spite of his last name, he's got a lot to prove.
All right, so we'll give him a little bit of time to prove, but I don't think Texas wants to give him too much time. They have high hopes, EJ. Is this their year to win the whole thing for the first time in, quite a while?
Yeah, well, Graz, they got a great chance, and I hear what Heather's saying, but at the same time, the reason why you had Arch Manning sit for 2 seasons as a true freshman and then also as a redshirt freshman is for now, because you wanted him to be prepared. You wanted him to kind of get some of those learning lessons in practice where it wasn't in the biggest stages with some of these situations. And so the other part about Texas that people forget, they're going to have a top 10 defense, maybe even a top 5 defense. I look at Anthony Hill Jr., Colin Simmons at linebacker. They bring a bunch of guys back on the defensive line and a few All-Americans in the secondary. So we're going to see, obviously, in the first week against Ohio State who, Texas is going to be. But at the same time, Ohio State has a new quarterback, too. So I would lean right now to Texas because of the patience that they've had for Arch Manning, now giving him this opportunity to be the full-time starter, and he should take off.
All right, well, with college football closer, I think, than a lot of people even realize at this point. We're just flipping the calendar to July. So these, with numbers that are provided to us by ESPN Bet, Paul, they've got Alabama's win total at 9.5. You going with more or less?
I am going with more, and I know exactly what happened last year in Kalen DeBoer's first season, but this team is better. He has a better quarterback. Ty Simpson, you may not have heard of him. Jalen Milroe was great, and he was also ice cold at times. Simpson, I think, is serviceable. He will lead this offense. The defense is the best Alabama has had since about 7 or 8 years ago, and I think Alabama is a legitimate shot at winning the SEC and the national championship.
Heather, there's no place where the pressure is more intense to win than Alabama. Is it a title or bust for Kalen DeBoer here already?
Only for Finebaum's collars. Look, I think this is a team that's capable of winning 9 games. But, when you look at their schedule, which is extremely difficult, you could see a loss on there to Georgia, to LSU, to South Carolina. It wouldn't surprise me if they lost in the Iron Bowl at Auburn. But I do think this team has the potential to be better, and we can have a lot of a conversation about if a 3-loss Alabama team can get into this 12-team college football playoff last year, because it didn't, and this year because it didn't last year. But it could be another 3-loss season for them.
EJ, what do you think of Alabama this year?
Yeah, I think Bama's going to be tough, and obviously they play my Florida State Seminoles in week 1, so I'm going Noles here. But in all seriousness, I do think they will get over 10 wins. But I think the big key for them, and Heather laid it out, they got some tough road games. You look at Georgia, out South Carolina, I believe also at Auburn in the Iron Bowl, and then you host LSU. So that's going to be a big question. And then look, I'm going to hold Paul to that. You said Ty Simpson's supposed to be better than Jalen Milroe. We're going to find out, Paul. But the other part too, and guys, we look at the tenure of Nick Saban at Alabama. He didn't win his first SEC championship until his 3rd year. He also didn't win his first championship nationally at Alabama until his 3rd season. So I still think there's growing curves there for Kalen DeBoer, but I do like that they got Ryan Grubb back as offensive coordinator. That should be great for the offense.
All right, sticking in the SEC, Heather, they have ESPN Bet has LSU's number at 8.5 wins. You going more or less there?
I'm going to go more for LSU, but I say that knowing that I think they're going to lose to Clemson in the season opener. Look, this defense has to get better, but I can tell you at SEC spring meetings in Destin, Florida recently, Brian Kelly said this might be the best team that he's had. So I would look for LSU to be an at-large bid in the college football playoff this year.
Paul, what do you think of where Brian Kelly stands with this LSU program right now? Is this like a make or break year, especially if it is the best team he's had there?
I think he needs to make the playoffs, but remember, this is Brian Kelly. This isn't some coach he picked up off the street. He has an impeccable resume. He is recruiting at an elite status, and that's why he has support down there in spite of a shaky season. But I agree with Heather for the first time in this entire conversation. I think LSU will get to the playoffs, and Brian Kelly was boasting a lot. Heather, you remind me of one of my teachers. Every time I thought I did something well, she slapped me on the knuckles and said, "Go back and study harder." Man, you are tough.
All right, let's move to the ACC. ACC now. EJ, Clemson, they have them projected at 9.5 wins. You going more or less there?
I'm going more here. And look, the Tigers are going to have a really good defense. And anytime I play Clemson or cover Clemson's teams, when they have a really good defense, they're championship kind of ready to go. And you look at Cade Klubnik as their quarterback. A lot of draft boards have him as a number 1 or number 2 guy. But I've watched this kid grow from a freshman. He's won 2 conference championships in his tenure there. I'm expecting big things. And they have a really good young receiving core. So I'd say easily more for the Clemson Tigers.
Heather, you mentioned you got Clemson starting 1-0. What do you think of their chances overall?
I agree with EJ. I think that this is a team that could be very special. The defensive line might be the best in the country with Cade Klubnik coming back. And this is a team that I thought last year was overrated. This year, I think they're underrated. I've got them number 2 preseason in my top 25 behind Penn State.
All right, exciting times to be talking college football. It's right around the corner.